Tributes are being paid to the 7 aid workers killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza on Monday. Their bodies are now being repatriated to their home countries. But questions continue to be asked about how the Israeli military managed to hit the convoy despite close coordination with a team. Arise International correspondent Faith Orr reports.
Making their final trip home. The bodies of 6 of the aid workers killed in Israeli airstrikes have left Gaza and are being repatriated. The 7th, a Palestinian driver, was buried on Tuesday. The attack has been met with horror and outrage, both in Gaza and around the world.
As we bid farewell to the foreign martyrs, 3 British, 1 American, 1 Australian and 1 Polish, this is a sign that the weapons provided by the British and American governments do not differentiate between Palestinians and other nationalities. Missiles struck the convoys of the World Central Kitchen with a logo visible and recognizable to the reconnaissance planes, F-16 planes, or whoever was bombing those vehicles. A message to the governments of these martyrs is: stop your support for Israeli occupation army. Stop supporting them with money, equipment and weapons, because those weapons killed your countrymen today.
The 3 Brits who died were all highly trained former soldiers with extensive experience in risk management. Their colleagues have been paying tribute, but also questioning how something like this could have happened.
We have looked very closely already at everything that preceded and went on after the incident. We are completely satisfied that all measures were correctly taken and executed. I think all accidents are avoidable with the correct risk control measures. It is extremely difficult to know exactly what happened on the ground, and I know that the Israeli Defence Force has very publicly stated that they are investigating this matter completely and thoroughly to understand what's occurred. I imagine that all aid organisations will be looking very closely at what happened, and those who are willing to continue to operate in this way will be making sure they put as many risk control measures in place as possible to minimise risk.
World leaders continue to condemn the attack. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak described it as a tragedy, but refused to commit to stop selling weapons to Israel.
I think we've always had a very careful export licensing regime that we adhere to. There are a set of rules, regulations and procedures that we'll always follow. And I've been consistently clear with Prime Minister Netanyahu since the start of this conflict that whilst, of course, we defend Israel's right to defend itself and its people against attacks from Hamas, they have to do that in accordance with international humanitarian law, protect civilian lives, and sadly too many civilians have already lost their lives, get more aid into Gaza. That's what we've consistently called for. And what we want to see, actually, is an immediate humanitarian pause to allow more aid in and, crucially, the hostages to also be released. And that's what we'll continue to push for.
But Israel continues to blockade access, and the killing of these workers has led to other organisations pausing their work in the Strip. It means hundreds of thousands of Palestinians will be deprived of life-saving meals.
Israel is a criminal state that doesn't care if someone is a foreigner. What matters is for it to stop anyone from helping the Palestinian people. People here are in distress, and those who came to help us are being attacked. They don't want aid to reach the Palestinian people. They want to kill people, children and even foreigners. What matters is that no aid reaches the Palestinian people. This is what Israel wants.
Israel certainly shows no sign of slowing its attacks, with strikes continuing across Gaza. Faith Orr, Arise News.
Correspondent Faith Orr joins me now in the studio. Thanks very much, Faith. Tell us, what's the latest updates, coming out from the Israeli-Gaza imbroglio?
So this attack has been discussed quite heavily at a NATO summit that's being held today. And just in the past few minutes, we have seen a statement from Jens Stoltenberg, of course, the NATO chief. And he has said that what we see now in Gaza is a humanitarian catastrophe. We see suffering, we see that civilians are killed. We also saw the strike against aid workers, and I condemn the strike. So it actually feels like this has backfired against Israel somewhat. We heard as well from the Belgian representative at NATO earlier, and she was saying that she would now back Palestinian statehood when the time comes. So the international community continues to condemn this attack. We have Poland summoning the Israeli envoy. They are also launching their own investigation into this because, of course, one of their nationals was killed. And we've had the US briefing today off the record that they are casting doubt on Israel's claim that it was unintentional. They brought up the case of journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, who was killed 2 years ago, where Israel eventually admitted that one of their soldiers was to blame, but no one has ever been held responsible. So they say it's not unusual, and as I say, this is off the record, but they say it's not unusual for Israel to deny responsibility in the first instance before eventually they admitting that they were in fact at fault.
The implications are not looking too good for Israel at the moment because, I mean, the EU and remember the UN resolution which America abstained from. But don't you think that this would have been a better time for Israel to accede to a ceasefire so that humanitarian aids can really go into Gaza, which today, I mean, everybody sees that it's a massive catastrophe or disaster?
Your assumption there is that Israel wants aid into Gaza, which of course most Palestinians would say is not true. Israel doesn't want aid into Gaza. In fact, UNRWA earlier, the UN agency for Palestinians, they said today that Israel was still blocking their trucks from getting to northern Gaza, which is the area which is worst hit in terms of famine. That is where we are seeing children dying of starvation and malnutrition. We know there are hundreds of trucks stuck at the border waiting to cross from Egypt into Gaza. They're not allowed to go anywhere. Today as well, we've seen ships from Cyprus full of aid turn back because they haven't been able to deliver it to Gaza. So they're trying to get aid in by land, by sea, and Israel is simply blocking it. So yes, I mean, it would have been a good time for them to call for a ceasefire.
Food is now being used as a weapon.
It's a weapon of war, yes, absolutely.
And now it looks very much like the crisis is spreading to other parts of the Middle East with the recent attack of the Iranian consulate in Syria, where about 7 of its Revolutionary Guards, 2 generals and 5 other officers were killed. What's the implication of, an all-out war in the Middle East?
There are certainly concerns that this could spread regionally, that this conflict can escalate. We actually heard from Iran earlier today. They are warning Israel. Then the statement, I'll quote, it says, "Soon we will see deadlier blows to the Zionist regime." So Iran's certainly saying that they are going to respond to that attack, but we don't know how they're going to respond. We will have to wait and see. It's not the first time that Israel has struck Damascus to kill members of the Revolutionary Guard. It happened a few weeks ago as well. But we're also seeing them, striking in the Yemen, striking in Lebanon, striking in Damascus. It's Al-Quds Day in the Middle East today. So we've heard from Ismail Haniyeh, who is the head of Hamas's political bureau. We've also heard from Hassan Nasrallah, who is the head of Lebanon's Hezbollah. Now, what they have said is that they are not backing down, that the armed groups, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and also in Iraq, are not backing down. They will continue to work together to strike at Israel. So they could have used today to speak and call for a ceasefire. And they are saying they want a ceasefire, but they're saying they want Israel to implement the ceasefire. They're not saying they're going to stop attacks first, because that simply is not what they want. They say they will stop their attacks when Israel stops their attacks.
And finally, very quickly, is the implications on world economy if the Middle East, you know, is embroiled in this conflict, which looks maybe setting, you know, to go there. The Red Sea would become a big danger for commerce and the rest.
Yeah, well, the shipping is already being hit. We know that. We know that some firms have stopped their ships going through the Red Sea because there is now a longer route being taken. It's costing more, it's costing the consumer more. I did hear one activist, and it was quite a good point that she made. She said, "I'm sorry your Amazon delivery is late. There's a genocide happening," which, you know, she has a point. I'm not saying, you know, it doesn't obviously excuse the Houthis' actions, but the point is they're not doing this arbitrarily, you know. If Israel stopped its war in Gaza, the Houthis said they would stop their strikes on the Red Sea. And while all of this has an economic cost, we need to remember the human cost. I was speaking to a colleague in Rafah in southern Gaza, and he was telling me that Gaza has been bombed so much now that the children there, by sound alone, can tell the difference between artillery shelling and an F-16 missile. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. Children know the difference in sound between artillery or an F-16 missile. I mean, no children anywhere in the world should even know what either of those sound like, never mind be able to tell the difference. And we know as well, the Gaza Health Ministry said today that the death toll now stands at 32,975, with many, many thousands more trapped under the rubble, presumed dead.
Yeah.
So yes, there's the economic cost, but I think really we need to focus on this, and especially if Israel goes into Rafah, just how many more casualties we could see yet.
Do you think the West is doing enough for there to be a ceasefire?
I mean, talks are ongoing in Doha as we speak. We've heard from the Qatari Prime Minister today, those talks are happening. Netanyahu gave permission to the Mossad chief to resume those talks. Do I think countries like the US could put more pressure on Netanyahu and his government? Yes, I don't think many people would disagree that the US is in a unique position to put pressure, and they're not doing that.
Thank you so very much, Faith Orr, Arise International correspondent, for coming to give us latest updates from the Israeli-Hamas war.